Okay, I think we are live now. Okay. So, welcome everyone to our fourth Baha'is Exploring Social Justice webinar, which is actually an interactive question and answer session with Marita Banda about sexual assault and crisis intervention. Marita got her training at the Boston Area Rape Crisis Center doing volunteer work and community outreach and education. We'll start with some of the questions that were submitted ahead of time, but please feel free to ask questions anytime using the question and answer function at the bottom of your screen. It just says Q&A and there's a small box. There's also an option to ask the question anonymously. So if you want to ask anonymous questions, feel free to do that as well. So Marita, maybe you can give us a little intro and then we can get started with the questions.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you, Sanam and Baha'is Exploring Social Justice for doing this topic. I think in the climate that we're at today, it's very important to talk about these things openly. I think there's a lot of myths surrounding this issue, which is what I really wanted to address. So hopefully we can all talk about that and basically have an open conversation about what's actually going on and kind of explore what we might have questions about and what the questions about some of the myths that we have too. Yeah, so we can start with some of the questions that we had initially.
Sorry, I had it muted. Okay, so let's start with just the questions on this list. The first one is, what is sexual assault?
Okay, so in Massachusetts, so sexual assault is defined as unwanted penetration through any orifice of the body, either by force or coercion. So that's the basic definition of what sexual assault is.
Okay, who is affected by sexual assault?
Right now, sexual assault is being looked at as an epidemic, unfortunately. And anyone and everyone can be affected by it at this point. And a lot of people think, oh, it's just women, and it's not. It can be men, it can be children, it can be people with disabilities, it can be the elderly. And we have to look at those issues and kind of redefine how we look at sexual assault, not just as something happening just between a woman and a man, but it can be happening between anybody.
Mm-hmm. So there was a question of how can people avoid sexual assault? I know you wanted to address that here.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So whenever people say, how can you avoid sexual assault, that is one of the biggest myths that people look past. So basically, there is no way to prevent it. And all we can really do right now is kind of educate ourselves on the subject and kind of look at where the rape culture is at this moment and kind of try to change that within ourselves. Unfortunately, if someone's going to sexually assault you, it's going to at least attempt to happen. Uh-huh. And there's nothing we can do to stop it. However, there's no like, oh, if you don't dress a certain way, if you don't walk at night. Most of the time when sexual assault happens, it's not some monster jumping out of the trees at night. It's someone that you know. It's in a place that you know. And it's a place where you feel comfortable. Mm-hmm. So people feel afraid knowing the answer to that question, but it's something that we all need to know so that people who are survivors don't feel as uncomfortable coming forward. Because in a lot of situations, from what I've seen personally, when it comes from someone that you know, you feel like you don't want to get that person in trouble. You don't want to talk about it because you feel like it's your fault. And all that victim blaming comes into place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. That kind of ties into the next question also. What can I do if I suspect someone is currently being abused?
If you suspect someone's currently being abused, you can't force someone to tell you what's happening to them. that's their story. That's what's happening to them. So all you can really do is support them, be there for them in whatever other way that you can. You can't really force someone to be like, oh, what happened? You better tell me what happened. Otherwise, you're a bad person. Mm-hmm. It's more just like being there for someone. If you're there for somebody and they know that you're there for them, they'll eventually, if they feel like it, open up to you. Mm-hmm. But if you act like, oh, I know you're hiding something from me, like tell me what's going on, there's going to be less likelihood of them actually talking to you about what's going on.
Yeah.
So the best way to do that is be like a supportive community, like be open about everything, not just that, but about anything anyone cares about.
Mm-hmm. Actually, I'm going to jump ahead because that was another one of the questions. How can we make our communities more supportive? You just mentioned how as an individual we could be more supportive, but as a community, as either a Baha'i community or any community, how can we be more supportive of survivors?
Yeah, I think one of the important things about this webinar is that in many religious communities, from what I've seen, sex is looked at as a dirty or bad thing, or if you do it, then you're a horrible person. So when things happen to people within these religious communities, they don't really speak out about it because they feel like they'll be shunned for other reasons aside from that. Mm-hmm. And they internalize all that victim blaming and they think, oh, it's my fault. It shouldn't have happened. Like I did something wrong. But if we let people know that we have these open forms of communication and like sexual assault isn't exclusive to non-religious communities. Mm-hmm. Like it's within all of our communities. So we need to kind of be open to that and realize that this does happen to people and that we all are human beings. You know, we're all having different experiences, but we need to understand that it's okay for people to talk about these things. Mm-hmm. And that when they start to talk about their sexual experiences, we shouldn't shun them or put them down for it. Because you never know like what's happening within your own community.
Yeah.
I just got an anonymous question about how long on average for a person talks about or reports an assault. So this is actually something that we talked about a lot at the Boston Rape Crisis Center, that we open it up to people. A lot of people don't talk about it until 60 years later, 90 years later. There's no like time frame for when people disclose information about something. And there isn't like, people go through their own process of, you know, post-traumatic stress disorder or whatever is going on in their life. So we try to open it to people who is like, okay, just because it didn't happen to you yesterday doesn't mean you can't talk about it. There's always time to talk about it. Yeah. No matter how old you are, no matter how many years ago it was, there's always a time to talk about it. Mm-hmm. There's no average time. As far as the medical, like rape kits and stuff like that, there is a time limit on that. But as far as disclosing information, you can always call the hotline and talk about it. And I know Saddam has the link up, I think.
For which one? The
BARC? Yeah.
Yeah, let me get that.
So one of the biggest things about BARC and a lot of places is that they offer free and anonymous resources for survivors and family members and friends who are going through all of this, because it affects everybody. So one of the biggest things is that a lot of these resources, I mean, they're all free. So you can get free counseling, you can get free legal services, like our medical apps, they go to the hospital, they talk to you through everything that's going on. Mm-hmm. So it should never be thought of as there's a time limit, because there never is. So if you go to the, like, get help, for example, yes, if you scroll down, it says you are not alone. Or scroll down a little bit more. So BARC services right here, or scroll up a little bit. It says, so there's hotline, medical advocacy, legal, counseling and support groups, case management, community services, professional training. And a lot of those, they have translators. And it doesn't really matter like what language you do speak. If they don't have a translator for what you're looking for, they will find one. Mm-hmm. So it's important to know that like these resources are free and anonymous. And you're not walking into a building that says Rape Crisis Center. You're walking into like a small place that is extremely anonymous with a huge support system.
If you're not in Boston or Massachusetts, is this still a resource that can be used?
Yep. They have a whole book sitting there if you call the hotline of people that you can call.
All over the country?
Yeah, so we can click out of this because someone just said they need a prayer in the chat. So
okay.
I know people want to. If you want to say the healing prayer, you can get a thumbs up. We can start with that.
We can, yeah.
Unless other participants feel uncomfortable about saying a prayer.
I think we can do this. Here, I'll share the screen. Since you're the spotlight video, maybe are you okay doing it?
Yeah, do you want to do it?
Sure.
Or do you want me to do it? I can do it. Doesn't matter.
Here, I shared the screen so everyone can see it anyway.
Okay.
You're actually the spotlight screen, so maybe it's better if you do it.
I will do it. I hope everyone's okay with saying a prayer. I think it's important. Thy name is my healing, oh my God, and remembrance of thee is my remedy. Nearness to thee is my hope, and love for thee is my companion. Thy mercy to me is my healing and my succor in both this world and the world to come. Thou verily art the all-bountiful, the all-knowing, the all-wise.
Okay.
And yeah, prayers, if anyone wants to stop and say a prayer and wants to share a quote that you want to talk about, we can definitely talk about that too. It doesn't have to be complete, question and answer. You want everyone to feel comfortable. If you want this to be a space where you just want to be here, that's okay too.
Maybe we can do one of these slightly lighter questions. How can we develop proper sex education, perhaps in schools or even in our local communities?
Wait on a second. Sorry, can you repeat the question?
I said, how can we develop proper sex education?
Well, I think one of the main things we can do is people need to realize that we don't have the proper sex education in schools and in communities, and that places like rape crisis centers all over the country, all over the nation, they are dedicated to looking into this epidemic, and they're dedicated to training people. So instead of trying to go off of what we think we know, I think it's important to access the resources that are diving into all the issues that we're trying to deal with this epidemic, and kind of let them educate us and take a step back and realize that we don't have all the answers and that we do need help, and that's okay. And just to kind of listen to what's going on in our own communities. Going from community to community, you have different issues. From different cultures, you have different issues. Boundaries are set in different cultures that are completely different.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to like change those things and change education, we need to really think about that. Like even in the school that I'm at, or I'll step away from that, but when I was in Boston, a lot of the colleges, they were teaching girls, oh, you won't get raped if you don't walk home alone. And we were like, are you kidding me? Like, that's really what you're teaching people? So it's like, that's how far back we are.
Yeah.
So
actually,
it's like,
there was a comment in the chat too that we need to address the needs of perpetrators more and put more emphasis on them, which goes along with what you're saying too.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that, yeah, I think just realizing that we don't have all the answers and reaching out to people and actually having open channels to talk about this issue, that's what's going to change things.
Mm-hmm.
Like change the way we talk about rape. Like I remember when I was in high school and hearing guys be like, oh, I totally raped that test or whatever, like so casually.
Yeah.
And like at one point I was like, what are you talking about? Like you have no idea who
Mm-hmm.
around you is affected by that word.
Yeah.
And that's a casual thing to just say.
Yeah.
Like it's things like that, like that's how we change rape culture, by changing the language and changing how we think about things and being more aware and talking to our allies who are there for us.
Mm-hmm. Actually, that was another one of the questions. How can I be an ally or an active bystander?
I think being an active bystander can be extremely difficult because with any situation, I think that when you see someone around you who's extremely uncomfortable, it's really hard to kind of intervene, and it's really hard to know when to intervene and be an active bystander. I know that some of the things that I was trained with before is that little like things that we can do, like if you see a situation where someone's uncomfortable, go up and ask somebody what time it is. Like I know like some people I know, like they saw people in restaurants or other places where things were kind of escalating.
Mm-hmm.
And it's being like, hey, do you guys know what time it is? Or do you know where this thing is? Just to kind of be like, I see you.
Yeah.
Like you're not alone right now. Like I see you.
Yeah.
So if you know what you're doing, I still see you.
Mm-hmm.
So like if you let people go on thinking that you don't see them, they're gonna act like you don't see them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I think it kind of puts the attention on them even if they don't know it.
It's funny that you say that actually. I feel like every woman I've ever talked to has been in an uncomfortable situation that the awkwardness was broken up by someone just doing something really benign or simple, like just to break it. And maybe they didn't even realize what they were doing, but yeah, something so simple. You don't necessarily think about what a large impact that could have on someone.
Yeah, I think some people think, oh, I have to jump in and fight off somebody, but that's not even it.
Yeah.
Like if you pick up on social cues and like people's body language, you can tell when somebody's a little uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And like if they're doing that stuff in public when you're around, like who knows what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
And I think also like with children especially, I was talking to a mother earlier today about this whole talk, and I was like, how do we address the issue of talking to your children about sexual assault? And I think one of the things that she said is that also respecting boundaries and letting your kids know that they have boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's kind of an active bystander thing to do too, is kind of like letting kids know, hey, you don't have to hug every relative at Christmas.
Yeah.
You don't have to sit on everyone's lap even if you don't want to.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to kiss everybody at your birthday. And like if they feel like they're empowered enough to say no, then that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And then if they see someone else in those situations, then they're gonna know like, hey, that's not okay.
Yeah.
Like I would feel uncomfortable in that situation, so that person is probably also very uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I could definitely relate to that. I have two daughters, and I've been trying to implement that more, letting them choose when they feel comfortable what they want to do. That was actually the next question that you answered. How do I teach my children about this topic? So maybe we could just move on to the next one, which is what are some common reactions to sexual assault? In parentheses, it says fight, flight, freeze. Maybe you can explain what those three things are.
Okay, yeah. So common reactions, which is kind of a weird thing to say, but so fighting back, there's the initial what's happening, I'm going to fight back. A lot of times, though, like that's an assumption that sexual assault always happens in a violent situation.
Yeah.
Which for the most part, it does not. It happens in very non-violent situations.
Mm-hmm.
Flight is, fleeing the situation, like your immediate reaction is to get out. Freezing, though, is, I think, more of the common thing that happens. I think that a lot of times from people I've talked to and in my own personal experience, you want to think flight or fight, but then in reality, your brain and your body goes into defense mechanisms and you freeze and you go into a place where it isn't happening.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That means your body's working. Mm-hmm. Any of those responses means your body is working. Whatever happens, that's your body's reaction, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people get really worried about reporting situations too, because sometimes they climax during the situation and the person will tell them, well, you liked it, so it's okay. Mm-hmm. And in reality, they didn't like it at all. But like that's your body's natural thing that's happening. So it'll happen pretty often, but it doesn't mean that it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we only have two more questions, and then maybe we can open it up. And if anybody that's listening has questions as well, feel free to jump in and write them. They'll just kind of queue up, and we can read them all as we go. So the next one is, what is affirmative consent?
So this is something that I like to talk about because a lot of people that I worked with, we have this old notion of no means no, which I think is a horrible thing to teach people, because what really we should be saying is yes means yes. Like that's what it is.
Yeah.
Just because someone's not saying no, it does not mean that they're saying yes.
Yeah.
And by any means necessary. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of situations where people with disabilities, like the elderly, like children, there's no way that they feel comfortable saying no.
Yeah.
And they're just not going to say anything. So to use in the Boston Rape Crisis Center, when we did our marches or whatever, we'd had signs that say like, consent is sexy. Like it's really fun to have sex with someone that's really into also having sex with you. Like it's not fun to coerce someone into doing something. Mm-hmm. Like, that's just not a normal, comfortable thing.
Yeah.
Like consent means you're saying yes. You're agreeing to something, And like a lot of times people might say yes too, even when they feel uncomfortable. But as human beings, we should learn to pick up on things like that. Mm-hmm. And to kind of be aware of the other person's boundaries. Like one of the things that at BARC we used to do when we did community outreach about boundaries is we'd be talking about boundaries, especially in like the middle school and high school, and there'd be somebody who would have like their backpack sitting in front, right? So while we're talking about boundaries, we go over and we start taking that person's backpack and we start going through it. Uh-huh. and they don't say anything because, they don't know what to say.
Yeah.
And they think it's an authority figure and they just don't do anything. And then we'll be like, why didn't you say something?
Mm-hmm.
And kind of like letting kids and some adults be aware that, like that wasn't okay. And like, it's okay to say something.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, like, why was I going through someone's backpack? Like, I shouldn't have been doing, like, that's just not something that you do. You don't just go through someone's backpack.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, I mean, I think it's great for us to move away from the no means no and move towards yes means yes.
Yeah, that's an interesting example too. I'd never heard of the backpack activity. That's probably an effective one if any teachers are listening. That's probably a good activity to do with the kids.
And also, too, when you're going through their backpack, none of their friends would say anything.
Yeah.
They wouldn't be like, oh, stop going through their backpack. That's their backpack. Because I don't know what's in their backpack. It could be anything.
Yeah. Someone in the chat just wrote about disassociation also, which kind of ties into what you're saying as well.
I think, yeah. So with dissociation and afterwards, is that crying? I was reading somewhere about people who are perpetrators and then feeling guilty about it and making the survivors, like almost apologize to them. I don't think that it's wrong to have disassociated. I think that's a very common thing. I don't think it's very uncommon for a perpetrator to start crying afterwards. I think that any physical reaction anyone has is, what's going to happen. You can't really change that. I'm going to read this for a second.
I don't know if maybe you want to read that out loud or sum it up as a question for the sake of the video.
Okay, I'm going to read it out loud. Is that okay for me to read it out loud?
Yeah, I think that's okay because some people are just watching the video and they can't see the chat.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. So someone wrote, as a child, I froze and disassociated. I prayed the removal of difficulties throughout the rape. Afterwards, he burst out crying. I thought I had handled it wrong. Oh, I thought I had handled it wrong. It seems to have changed me forever. I feel very angry towards Baha'i women and girls who dress and act in ways that can be provocative and then deny responsibility. And they're not the ones who get raped either. I was, and I am angry about that. So I think that I completely get where you're coming from, because at the same time, it's like there isn't a certain type of way or you dress or act that's going to get you raped. And also, you never know if they have been raped or not. I understand where your anger comes from, because I feel like in a lot of situations, something happens to you and you think in your head, okay, the type of girls that get raped, they're like this. And then you see girls who are like that and their lives are perfect, seemingly perfect. And it's understandable how you would be upset about that. I'm just wondering, if some people who publicly deny responsibility, I mean, I feel like victims, survivors shouldn't be held responsible for what happens to them. And that includes this person who wrote this. I don't think that you should feel like you're responsible. Okay, and then she wrote, there were girls in the project who dressed and acted in ways that invited him. I didn't. So I think that's also saying that you don't know what he liked. It might have been that whatever this person was interested in was you. It wasn't that he liked girls who dressed provocatively. And girls who dress provocatively, and that can be anything, because anyone can find anything provocative. We all have different tastes. The person who picked you, he picked you for whatever reason that he picked you. And sometimes it's because, people who are perpetrators are known to being master manipulators. So a lot of times they choose people who they can pick out, in certain situations and who they feel confident about picking out. So it's not that perpetrators are constantly looking for the seemingly most provocative person. And sure, I think he came into the faith because he thought it was going to be a love free for all. And, that's one of the reasons why I think this talk is important. I feel like that in a lot of religious communities, yeah, that happens. People come in being like, oh, I'm going to be a part of a religious community and I'm going to be trusted. And that happens quite frequently. That's why a lot of sexual assault happens within families. Who do you trust the most? People in your family. Who do other people trust the most? People in the religious community. So it's like we look at these things, and like even when I lived in Brazil for a while, there was a lot of sexual assault happening within the religious community. And not to say it's just that country, but I saw it very closely happening to people. And the trust that they had for these people was unreal. So it's like, if people know that they can get your trust and manipulate a situation, if they want to do it, they'll do it. Yeah. I think that's a huge thing. Is what we're trying to say is the thing that you cannot prevent it from happening. You cannot provoke it to happen. I think that's another thing. You cannot provoke a sexual assault. There's not a certain way you can dress that will make someone want to do it. Mm-hmm. And then the thing is that perpetrators need to understand that, we're humans that have control over our actions and our emotions. And it's just kind of an animalistic thing to think that you have no control. So it's like if people are in a mindset that they want to manipulate a situation, they will do it. It's unfortunate, but they will. Yeah. And that's what we need to realize. And that's why, like, with all this victim blaming that's going on, it's also unfortunate. And I think that survivors need to realize that it's not your fault and that these things are going to happen. And unfortunately, they did happen or almost happened, and that it's not your fault.
We only have one last question on the list, and then we can continue with more. This one is about how we can dismantle rape culture and the objectification of women.
This is also a good last question to go on, because I love to talk about this with people if they want to start talking about it. Let's see. From what I've seen and experienced, and from my own personal beliefs, I think that with a lot of different issues in our society, changing the language is a huge thing. Call out your friends. Call out your family members. Call out your colleagues. If you want to dismantle rape culture, if no one's telling them that it's wrong, if no one's telling them, hey, don't say that, and if you do that, you're being an active bystander. If you call someone out, you're being an active bystander. Because you're making that person think. You're making them think, oh man, I never thought that me saying that joke or me saying that slang or me, whatever it is that they're doing or me grabbing someone a certain way, I just thought that was funny. I just thought it was common. I thought it was part of our culture. Don't let them think that doing something or saying something is okay because it's part of your culture. It's okay because it's part of your workplace. It's okay because it's part of your gender, sexual identity, and how people relate to you in this world. Mm-hmm. I think calling people out on the language, because that's how we communicate, is a huge thing. And I've seen it happen, especially on like certain college campuses where, especially men, like calling out their boys. And like a lot of women too. I hear a lot of women talking certain types of way. And that can happen too. And like calling people out is going to make people think twice about saying something because then they're going to think, oh, who else is going to call me out? And then if kids hear you talking about certain things, they're going to think, oh, my parent doesn't talk that way. Or I saw my mom get called out. I saw my dad get called out. Like, I will never talk that way. Because that's one, embarrassing.
Mhm.
That's humiliating.
Yeah.
And it just, just shouldn't happen. And I think especially in religious communities, we need to call people out and not just on the language, but about not talking about the language. Like if we're not talking about it, that's a huge problem because this is an epidemic. If we're not talking about it, that is a huge problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it's like the big start to it. And like from there, you decide on your community.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's any more questions, if you want to talk about something else or bring up a certain topic. If not, if you want to bring up the RAIN resource website.
Yeah, let's go through that. And if people have questions, maybe just line them up using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And there's an option that you can click on that makes your question anonymous. It should actually automatically be checked, but if not, then just look for it.
And just a reminder too that, a lot of resources at your local rape crisis center, they are free. They're free. They're free. So you can use them. Friends, family,
counseling services,
coworkers. What's that?
There's counseling services as well.
Yep. Counseling, group counseling, family counseling, free. Mm-hmm. So it's good to know they are free. They have translators. They have counselors. They have hotlines. They have legal advice. You can get legal advice translated. You can have medical people, medical advocacy, which means that let's say you go to the hospital for whatever reason, or someone you know is at the hospital for a reason, there's going to be a lot of people asking them questions. These crisis centers can send somebody to the hospital to be by your side, to help you go through all those questions, to just be a support system for you while you're there. Even if you don't want to call your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, your boyfriend, your partner, whoever, you can call the crisis hotline. Those people will never know. Yeah. They'll just be there for you throughout the whole process and beyond.
Mm-hmm. Here is the RAIN website.
Yep. So a lot of people don't know about RAIN, which is one of our, you can scroll down a little bit. RAIN is one of the nation's, well, you can read it, nation's largest anti-sexual violence organizations. And I don't know if I mentioned this before, but also with BARC and a lot of other crisis centers, you have the option of talking to a male or a female. And I know that a lot of men feel uncomfortable coming forward or talking about things that bother them. And it's okay. Like it's not just a women's rights thing. It's an everybody thing. And that's one of the biggest things I think that is new to a lot of crisis centers is the option to talk to males. And I know for sure at BARC, they have resources for transgendered people, for people of all different, sexual orientations. If you want to feel comfortable and if you don't feel safe in your housing situation, these places will also help you with that because they want to make sure, number one, that you're safe. If you don't feel safe, we'll make sure that you're safe. Mm-hmm. If you need help with housing, you can get help with housing. So someone just wrote, I couldn't go to public counseling service because I didn't want it to reflect badly on the faith. And I didn't feel anyone in the faith would be willing and open to hear it, not even the LSA. So I don't know if there's anyone on here that isn't a part of the Baha'i faith, but the LSA is a local spiritual assembly that kind of governs your local Baha'i community. So, I mean, unfortunately, this is a very common problem. And I think this is one of the things that why I think this talk is important. I think that the Baha'i faith being open to so many things and being part of the social justice community in our country, we need to be open to this also. And we need to realize that if we have resources for everything else, our LSAs need to have resources for sexual assault survivors and their families and their friends. And this happens way too often for us not to have anything. And even if we don't have the answers, at least we can say, we support you. And here's a resource. If we have no resources, then who are we? Why are we doing this? Like, who are we supporting? We're pretending like we're perfect because we're not. We need to actually have these resources and make people like this person who is talking about this right now feel comfortable. The fact that she felt uncomfortable going to the LSA is unreal. Someone else wrote, you would be surprised how many LSAs deal with this issue. And then she wrote, thank you, call each other out too, kindly, gently, but truthfully. Yeah, it doesn't have to be like a rude thing. Call each other out kindly. Be like, hey, by the way, I have a friend, family member, that would love to get resources and doesn't know how. Like, can we please talk about this and figure out a way? Because it has come up more times than you think. I've been to youth conferences where this has come up many times, and youth have felt very uncomfortable coming forward about it because you're not supposed to have sex before marriage. So why would any young person tell somebody that they were raped if they're not supposed to have sex before marriage? Like, that's a shame. And that lies in our community, and we need to have resources for these issues, and we need to not shun people or make them feel bad about things that have happened to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've never seen any of these. I mean, you and I went to several summer camps. These things were never discussed. It was...
Yeah, not at all.
Yeah.
They said chastity, 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 and
Mm-hmm.
that was it.
Yeah.
So when people were doing other things, you didn't know what to do. You know?
There's a suggestion about one-on-one presentations about premarital sex.
Wait, what was that?
It's in the chat, the webinar chat.
What about one-to-one presentations or doing youth about premarital sex? One-to-one presentations, are you saying that you want one person to talk to one other person? Or and the repercussions and psychology effects of premarital sex group, a class. Let's see. The thing is, we keep using this word premarital sex. Like, sex is sex. And let's be real, a lot of sexual assault happens within a relationship, within a marriage, where someone feels like they have to do something because they are married to somebody or because they're in a relationship with someone. So saying that the problem lies outside of marriage is a lie. So to tell people, oh, everything will be perfect if only you wait to have sex until you're married is a lie. And I think that we need to have open conversations with youth about, not only just safe sex, but about sex in general, and the fact that it's okay if you are already having sex, come talk to us about it and don't feel bad about it. And not saying, oh, you're having premarital sex, so therefore that's a whole different category.
Yeah.
Like, they should feel open. If youth are having sex, they're gonna have sex. Let's be real. You're not gonna stop someone from having sex if they're already having it.
Mm-hmm.
So why in the world would you tell them there's a difference between having sex premaritally and than when you're married? There's no difference. Sex is sex.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And so it's like, if you make youth feel uncomfortable to talk about it if they're not married, then that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
And hopefully, like, on a micro level within families, people are talking to their kids about sex. Because they feel uncomfortable about talking about it and they're already doing it, things are going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Whether they, something happens to them, whether they get pregnant, whether they go have illegal abortions, like, things are going to happen if you don't talk about it.
Yeah.
Wait on, there's things in the chat. I have literally seen them cover up for a serial perpetrator because of who he was, a sacred cow. Exactly. And if parties within marriage aren't handling their issues together, it can weaken one party to go outside of the marriage. I've seen this happen. Women learn to take care of your man, and men learn to take care of your woman. And it's not about taking care of someone, I don't think. It's more about having respect. And within individual relationships, that's on you guys. I don't know what's going on in anyone's relationship. You know what's going on in my head. But we all need, when you get into a relationship, it's about respect. Do what you got to do, whether it's sexually, non-sexually, whatever. Even if you're not having sex, there's no reason to cheat on your spouse. You shouldn't be forced to please somebody just so they don't cheat on you. Okay, she says that's what I mean by taking care of your partner. Okay, yeah. So yeah, taking care of, respecting, being there for one another, the spiritual aspect, connecting. I'm sure, Sanam, you're married, you can speak on marriage and connecting. But I think it's more than sex at that point. But I think that a huge myth too is that when people are married, there is no sexual assault. And I think that we need to learn that that's just not true. And that especially people in the faith need to learn that it's okay if you're in a relationship or a marriage and you feel uncomfortable, that you can come forward to your LSA. And she says, some people don't marry for the right reason. They may be unhealthy about sex to begin with. And that's also very true. If we're not teaching people about, what we're talking about right now, then how are you supposed to go into a marriage? How are you supposed to go into a healthy marriage if you're not talking about it? How are you supposed to have children grow up in healthy relationships? You don't talk about it. You don't call each other out in a healthy way.
Yeah.
How is that supposed to build? Good communities start at a micro level, and that's the family. So if you're not educating your family about these issues, your community is going to go down in a variety of different ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you had mentioned this earlier, but I mean, it's been my experience also that a lot of this stuff just gets brushed under the carpet. Don't talk about it. Don't say those words. Nothing. And then when I went to college, actually, it was a huge shock to me. Like everything that I was seeing around me, I was like, I just don't know what is happening right now. I think that's a common experience as well. I don't think if you aren't talking about it, it kind of hits you suddenly.
Yeah, exactly. Especially on college campuses.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're getting people from all different backgrounds, all different family values, all different belief systems who, have never talked about it with each other, never talked about it with their families. Like, how are we supposed to build on that? Like, we're starting from ground zero.
Yeah. Actually, in the chat, somebody shared a third resource. I'm just going to share the screen just for people watching the video. This is a third resource. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but Justine mentioned it. Looks like it's a national online project dedicated to the primary prevention of sexual assault and domestic violence. I am not sure. Resources, projects. Okay.
What if like they're
oh, sounds like it's more of an education website about the topic. Okay. But the link is here. It's in the chat as well if anyone's interested.
Okay, so someone said, hold on a second.
Someone says, what do you recommend?
What do we recommend for educating?
I'm assuming so.
Yeah, so for, okay, says yes. I think that for educating our youth, I think that at first what you need to do is talk to your community, see where you're at, because the thing is that we all are on different cultural levels. Like where I live in Amherst, Massachusetts, I don't feel scared about talking to people about this situation. I know that in a lot of other communities, they might feel like, this isn't something we should be talking about. At one of our feasts, we talked about the gay issue and how Baha'is can be gay, and that was a huge myth. You know what I mean? And about how Northampton and Amherst are a huge gay transgender community, and we need to talk about that. I think that with all these training youth groups going around, maybe, there are so many documentaries and so many ways to address these issues through media that I think would really help youth. I think that, someone at the Race Amity conference said that as people who are like in my mid-30s, but there's people who are older who can take the back seat and kind of be elders rather than act like older people. Like, don't act like older people, act like you're the elders. Listen to them, see where they're coming from, go to their events, Don't just go at it being like, I know what's right for you, so therefore I'm going to do it. Like, I think, the first step is kind of befriending some people. I think it does start with youth, with a lot of our issues. I think that maybe focusing some firesides, maybe on quotes about love and relationships and things like that can really make a difference. Making an interfaith building thing, starting at communities and colleges in our communities and talking to people there, because they're already talking about it. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. Yeah. This conversation's already happening. Like, we can't just contain ourselves in a bubble and pretend like this is the first time we're talking about this. This has been talking about for a while now. I think outreach to people who are already talking about it, like we said, Boston Rape Crisis Center, they have the answers. Any rape crisis center in your area will definitely have the answers for this. So it's like there isn't one right answer, but if you go to your community resource and say, hey, I have a concern. I have a religious community that I'm trying to, address these issues with, because I want my community to feel safe. I want my community to feel supported. And you know what? I want to be the first LSA that supports people who have been in sexual assault situations. I want to support family members and friends who have family and friends who have been in these situations. I want to be the first. Help me figure out how I can get those resources to my religious community. And I can guarantee you they will jump on board so fast, it'll make your head spin.
Adding to that, I mean, what Marisa is doing for us now, I'm sure another representative can do for your local community. that could be a starting point if people want a takeaway idea. This was obviously very simple to set up. I asked a question, I got an answer, and here we are. So I'm pretty sure you can all arrange this in your local communities as well.
Yeah. I guess I just want to read this last thing someone wrote in the chat. Oh, yeah, like we said, movie nights can be a good springboard for elevating meaningful conversations and for community building, capacity building. It can be helpful to read newspaper stories together about sexual issues today. I strongly agree with that. The thing that has me worried nowadays is that I've done research where men and boys are being accused and prosecuted for false accusations. We're supposed to be in the forefront of these issues because we have the writings for guidance. I think that, yeah, like you said, read up on it, go to your local resources. Unfortunately, a lot of people are being falsely accused of things, but there's also people who are not being accused of things that should be. And yeah, she says we are supposed to be at the forefront of these issues because we have the writings for guidance. And that's the truth. The fact that we aren't at the forefront, what does that say? And also, this next person wrote, which, yes, is completely true. Only 2 to 8% of reports are false. Only a tiny fraction of survivors ever report. This is the exact same percentage as the false accusations of all crimes. It's usually men who allege false allegations, though. I don't know. So the thing is that the 2 to 8% of reports are false is correct. Whether it's men or women, who knows? The thing that we can do is not go back and forth. I think not go back and forth about whether it's men or women. I think it's just the fact that we need to start on a micro level. Go to your crisis center. Ask them how they can, because actually, too, at the Boston Area Rape Crisis Center, they had resources for how to address these issues within religious communities. So I'm pretty sure that in other communities that you guys live in, you can go to your crisis centers and they have specific people who are dealing with religious communities and how to safely, effectively, and respectively, most importantly, go to your religious leaders or the youth in your community, more importantly, and kind of ask for advice. Yeah, she says it's usually men who allege false allegations, though. Crisis centers don't have the ratings for guidance. Yes, they don't have the ratings for guidance, but they have the resources to give you to go forward.
Right, and you can implement those into your own local community actions. So
I'm not saying that the rape crisis centers have the the say all for all religious ways to approach your community, but they do have the resources for you to know how to go into a religious situation. And on your own, you can do your own personal, spiritual guidance about that situation.
Actually, we've approached the end of the webinar. I don't know if you want to, I know that Maritza has said she would make herself available to anybody who wants to reach out to her privately. I don't know if you want to maybe type your email address or in the chat, or if you want people to just find you on Facebook, but
yeah, I'll write it in the chat. They can also find me on Facebook. I'm open to talk about it more. Obviously, yeah, I just think it's an important issue. I'm glad you guys tuned in, and I'm glad we're able to talk about things openly. And I hope that this isn't the first and last. I hope that we can continue to do something about this. And I hope that you guys express to your friends and family that there are free resources for legal advocacy, for medical advocacy, counseling for friends and family, for survivors, hotline for men and women, for transgendered people. It doesn't matter what your background is, what language you speak. These resources are free, and you can spread that.
I will post the links that you shared into the chat, and I'll also provide them on the page with the playback.
Okay.
But thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. And again, if anyone wants to reach out to Marita privately, you can. I put her email address inside of the chat. So thank you again, and please stay tuned for our next webinar, which will be in 3 weeks, and it's with Kevin Locke, and you can look for that information inside of, yeah, it's going to be good. Yeah, you can look for that information in the Facebook group. And if you're not in the Facebook group, then feel free to join.
Nice.
Okay.
I'm definitely going to talk to more of you. I see more comments coming up, but we can talk further outside of here.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Bye.